The blood on his knuckles was still fresh when Junsung walked through the door at dawn, and I knew someone had tried to kill him because of me. 3 months ago, I was just a nursing student in Lagos with a planned-out life. Now I'm standing in a Seoul penthouse cleaning wounds off a 60-year-old Korean crime lord who just became my husband to erase my father's debt. The worst part isn't that I married a man who terrifies half of Seoul. It's that when he kissed me by accident last week and I felt my heart skip, I realized I might actually be falling for him. Welcome to my channel, Afro-Korean Tales. Before we continue, please hit the subscribe, like, and share button. The humid air of Lagos clung to everything like a second skin, thick with the scent of plantain frying from street vendors and the distant hum of traffic. Joyce moved through the crowded market with practiced ease, her nursing textbooks heavy in her worn canvas bag. At 19, she had mapped out her entire life with the precision of a surgeon's hand. Medical school, a clinic in her neighborhood, a life built on her own terms. That dream shattered the night her father came home with trembling hands and eyes that couldn't meet hers. "There are men coming," he said simply. "Bad men. The debt is too large now." Joyce had known about the money her father borrowed to pay for her mother's surgery 2 years ago, but she hadn't known about the interest that multiplied like a virus, or that the lender was connected to organizations that operated in shadows. She definitely hadn't known that the solution would arrive in the form of Park Junsung, a man whose name alone made her father's voice drop to a whisper. 3 weeks later, Joyce stood in Incheon International Airport with a single suitcase and a passport that felt like a death certificate. The arrangement had been explained to her in clinical terms. Marriage. Sponsorship. Her family's debt erased. She would live in Seoul, continue her studies, and fulfill the obligations of a wife to a man she had seen only once in a photograph. A man whose sharp features and cold eyes had made her stomach turn. The driver who collected her from the airport spoke no English and she spoke no Korean. They drove through streets that glittered with neon and possibility, a city that should have excited her but instead felt like a beautiful cage. The car climbed into the hills where the buildings spread out, giving way to estates hidden behind high walls and security gates. Junsung's home was not what she expected. It was modern, all clean lines and floor-to-ceiling windows that offered views of the city below. Inside, everything was cream and black and chrome, expensive in a way that made her feel like a stain on pristine fabric. A housekeeper showed her to a bedroom that was larger than her entire home in Lagos. Joyce set down her suitcase and sat on the edge of the bed, her hands shaking. She met him that evening in what the housekeeper called the sitting room. Park Junsung was taller than she remembered from the photograph, his frame still solid despite his 60 years. He wore a black suit that looked like it cost more than her father's annual salary, and when he looked at her, his expression was unreadable. "You will have everything you need here," he said in English that was heavily accented but clear. "Your studies will continue. You will be safe." Joyce wanted to scream that she didn't want his safety, his money, his calculated kindness. Instead, she nodded because what else could she do? He studied her for a long moment, something flickering in his eyes that might have been curiosity or assessment. Then he turned and left, and Joyce discovered that loneliness could exist even in a house with other people. The first week passed in a blur of disorientation. Joyce attended her nursing classes at a private university where the other students eyed her with barely concealed interest. The foreign girl who had married Park Junsung. She heard the whispers even when they thought she couldn't understand. She learned quickly that her husband was not just wealthy but feared, that his business interests extended into territories that polite society pretended not to see. At home, they existed in separate orbits. Junsung left early and returned late, often with men who wore expensive suits and hard expressions. Joyce kept her room, studying until her eyes burned, trying to outrun the reality of her situation. When they did cross paths, their exchanges were brief and formal, like diplomatic negotiations between hostile nations. But she felt his presence constantly. The way the staff moved with practiced deference when he was home. The phone calls he took in rapid Korean, his voice dropping to dangerous. Softness. The nights when cars arrived after midnight and she heard voices from downstairs, tense discussions that made her pull her blankets tighter. On her 12th day in Seoul, Joyce made a decision. If she was going to survive this, she needed to feel less helpless. She found a gym in Gangnam that offered self-defense classes, and she signed up using the credit card Jun-sung had given her. The instructor was a woman named Min-ji who asked no questions and taught with patient intensity. Joyce threw herself into training with the same focus she applied to her studies. Every punch she threw was a reclamation of something stolen. Every block was a refusal to accept powerlessness. Her body ached constantly, muscles she didn't know she had protesting their new purpose, but the pain felt good. Productive. Like she was building armor from the inside out. She had been training for 2 weeks when Jun-sung appeared at the gym. Joyce was in the middle of a sparring session, her focus narrowed to Min-ji's movements, when she caught sight of him standing near the entrance. He wore casual clothes today, dark jeans and a fitted black shirt that somehow made him look more dangerous than his suits. Several of the gym members had noticed him, their exercises faltering as they registered who he was. Joyce's concentration broke. Min-ji's punch connected with her shoulder, not hard enough to hurt, but enough to make her stumble. "Your mind left your body," Min-ji said disapprovingly. Again. But Joyce couldn't focus anymore. She was acutely aware of Jun-sung watching her, his expression impossible to read. When the session ended, she grabbed her towel and water bottle, intending to leave without acknowledging him. He intercepted her near the door. "You did not tell me you were learning to fight," he said. "You didn't ask what I do with my time." Joyce kept her voice level, refusing to let him see how his presence unsettled her. Something that might have been amusement crossed his face. "You move well. Better than I expected." The compliment, if that's what it was, irritated her more than criticism would have. "Is there something you need?" "I came to see what my wife does when she disappears 3 times a week." He stepped closer, and Joyce caught the scent of his cologne, something dark and woody. "You interest me, Joyce Eshin." "I'm not trying to interest you." She moved past him, her heart hammering. "I'm trying to survive you." She felt his gaze follow her all the way to the changing room. When she emerged 20 minutes later, he was gone, but she found his driver waiting to take her home. The message was clear. He knew where she went. What she did. She was under observation even when she thought she had carved out space for herself. That night, Joyce couldn't sleep. She sat in the window seat of her bedroom, looking out at Seoul's glittering sprawl, and felt the walls closing in. She had traded one cage for another, this one gilded and spacious, but a cage nonetheless. The door to her room opened without a knock, and Jun-sung stepped inside. "You should lock your door," he said. "Would that stop you?" Joyce didn't turn from the window. "No." His honesty was brutal. "But it would make me respect your boundaries more." "I didn't think you cared about boundaries." He moved to stand beside her, looking out at the same view. "You think you know what kind of man I am. I know you're the kind of man who buys other people's daughters." The words hung between them, sharp and ugly. Joyce expected anger, but when she finally looked at him, his expression was thoughtful. "Your father came to me because he had nowhere else to go. The men he borrowed from would have done worse than offer marriage." Jun-sung's voice was quiet. "I gave him an alternative. I gave you one too. You gave me an ultimatum. That's not the same as a choice." "Perhaps not." He turned to face her fully, and Joyce was struck by how the city lights reflected in his eyes. "But you are here. You are safe. You are learning to fight. These are not small things." Joyce wanted to argue, to maintain her anger, because it was easier than acknowledging the complicated truth of her situation. But exhaustion suddenly crashed over her, the weight of the past month pressing down like a physical thing. Without thinking, she leaned her head against the cool glass of the window. "I don't know how to do this," she admitted. "I don't know how to be your wife, or live in your world, or pretend this is normal." "Then don't pretend." His hand came up, hovering near her shoulder but not quite touching. "Be exactly who you are. I did not marry you to change you. Why did you marry me?" The question escaped before she could stop it. Jun-sung was quiet for so long that Joyce thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice carried something she hadn't heard before. Uncertainty. Because when I saw your photograph, you looked at the camera like you were daring it to break you. He lowered his hand. I wanted to see if that spirit was real. I wanted to know if someone could still look at the world that way. Joyce didn't know what to say to that. The honesty of it unsettled her more than any threat could have. When she finally turned to respond, he was already walking toward the door. Lock it, he said without looking back. Or don't. But know that I will respect your choice either way. The door closed behind him, and Joyce sat in the darkness, her mind racing. She got up and locked the door, then immediately felt foolish for it. What was she protecting herself from? Him? Or the way her heart had stuttered when he spoke about her spirit? The next few weeks developed a rhythm. Joyce attended her classes, trained at the gym, and returned home to a house that felt less empty somehow. Jun-sung was around more often, his presence no longer something she could ignore or avoid. They shared meals occasionally, conversations that started stiffly but gradually found an easier flow. She learned that he had built his organization from nothing, that he had principles even if they didn't align with legal ones, that he read poetry in Korean and played classical piano when he thought no one was listening. He learned that she wanted to specialize in emergency medicine, that she missed the chaos of Lagos markets, that she sang when she studied even though she had a terrible voice. They were learning each other in increments, small revelations that felt like gifts neither of them knew how to properly give or receive. Joyce tried not to think about what this meant. Tried not to notice how her pulse quickened when she heard his voice or how she had started timing her evenings to coincide with when he came home. This was an arrangement, she reminded herself. A business transaction dressed up in wedding certificates and shared living space. Nothing more. But her body hadn't received that memo. One evening, as she was crossing the living room with books balanced in her arms, Jun-sung came around the corner at the same moment. They collided, not hard but enough that Joyce stumbled. His hand shot out to steady her, catching her waist, and suddenly they were too close. Joyce could see the faint lines around his eyes, the gray threading through his dark hair, the way his jaw tightened as he looked down at her. Time did something strange. Stretched and contracted at once. Joyce's gaze dropped to his mouth without her permission, and then somehow the distance between them had closed. Their lips met in a kiss that was accident and inevitability tangled together. For a heartbeat, Joyce froze. Then heat flooded through her, shocking in its intensity. Jun-sung's hand tightened on her waist, his other hand coming up to cup the back of her neck, and Joyce felt herself responding before her brain could engage. Her books tumbled to the floor, forgotten, as she gripped his shirt to keep herself steady. The kiss deepened, became something urgent and searching. Joyce had been kissed before, quick fumbling attempts with boys her own age, but this was different. This was a man who knew exactly what he was doing, who kissed like he approached everything else in his life. With total focus and devastating precision. When they finally broke apart, Joyce's breathing was ragged. Panic immediately followed the heat, cold and sharp. I should not have done that, she said, stepping back so quickly she almost tripped over her fallen books. Joyce. Jun-sung's voice was rough. No. She held up a hand, needing distance, needing to think. This cannot happen. We cannot do this. Why not? He didn't try to close the distance between them, but his gaze held her in place as effectively as his hands had. We are married. That doesn't make it right. Joyce bent to gather her books, needing something to do with her hands. I did not choose this. I did not choose you. This is just proximity and loneliness and desperation dressed up as something else. The words came out harsher than she intended, designed to wound because she was terrified of the feelings spiraling through her chest. When she straightened, Jun-sung's expression had shuddered into the distant mask she remembered from their first meeting. Of course, he said coolly. Forgive the presumption. He left the room, and Joyce stood there clutching her books, her lips still tingling, her heart hammering against her ribs. She told herself she had done the right thing. She had established boundaries, protected herself. So why did it feel like she had just made a terrible mistake? That night, Joyce lay awake dissecting every moment of the kiss. The way her body had responded without hesitation. The way something in her chest had felt like it was unlocking. The way she had wanted it to continue even as terror flooded through her. She had spent her entire life being careful, making smart choices, following the right path. Falling for Park Jun-sung was not smart. It was the opposite of smart. He was a criminal who had purchased her like property, a man who lived in a world of violence and shadows. But he also read poetry and played piano. He had given her freedom within their arrangement. He looked at her like she was someone worth knowing rather than just owning. And he kissed like he could consume her entirely and leave nothing behind but burning. Joyce pressed her hands against her eyes and tried to will away the confusion. This was what happened when you isolated someone, she told herself. Basic psychology. She had formed an attachment to her captor because her circumstances had left her no other option. It wasn't real. It couldn't be real. Except it felt real. Terrifyingly, dangerously real. The following days were tense. Joyce threw herself into her studies and training with renewed intensity, using exhaustion as a shield. Jun-sung was polite and distant when their paths crossed, treating her with the formal courtesy of a host to a guest. It should have been a relief. Instead, it made Joyce's chest ache in ways she refused to examine. Minji noticed the change during their next training session. "Your head is somewhere else," her instructor observed as Joyce missed an easy block for the third time. Man trouble? Joyce wanted to deny it but couldn't find the energy. Something like that. The husband. Minji's expression was knowing. "I looked him up after he came to the gym. You married interesting company." "I didn't have a choice." "We always have choices. Sometimes they are just between bad options and worse options." Minji demonstrated the block again. "But choice is choice. You could have said no to him. And let my family suffer?" Joyce shook her head. "That was not really a choice." "Then maybe you need to make different choices now. About what this situation becomes." Minji stepped back into a ready stance. "Again. And this time, be here with your body instead of lost in your head." Joyce tried to focus, but Minji's words stayed with her long after the session ended. What did she want this situation to become? What choices did she actually have? She found part of her answer that evening when she came home to discover Jun-sung in the piano room, the door open for once. He sat at the grand piano playing something melancholic and beautiful, his eyes closed, his usual rigid control absent. Joyce stood in the doorway watching him, seeing something she hadn't before. Loneliness. This powerful man who commanded fear and respect was alone in a way that mirrored her own isolation. When the piece ended, she spoke without planning to. "That was beautiful." Jun-sung's eyes opened, but he didn't startle. "You are home early." Class was cancelled. Joyce moved into the room, drawn by something she couldn't name. "I did not know you played." "There are many things you do not know about me." He turned on the bench to face her. "Just as there are many things I do not know about you. Maybe we should change that." The words came out before Joyce could second-guess them. Something shifted in Jun-sung's expression. Not quite hope, but something adjacent to it. "What are you proposing?" "I do not know yet." Joyce sat in one of the leather chairs near the piano. "But I am tired of living like a ghost in this house. If I have to be here, if we have to be married, then maybe we should try to actually know each other." And the kiss. His directness should not have surprised her, but Joyce felt heat rise to her cheeks anyway. I panicked. I said things I did not entirely mean. She forced herself to meet his gaze. But I also meant some of them. This situation is complicated. I am complicated. I need time to figure out what I feel versus what I think I should feel. Jun-sung considered this, his expression thoughtful. "Time I can give you. Patience I have learned over 60 years. But Joyce, I need you to understand something." He stood and crossed to where she sat, crouching down so they were eye level. The position should have made him less intimidating, but instead it felt more intimate somehow. He was choosing to lower himself, to meet her as an equal. "When I kissed you, it was not proximity or loneliness or any other convenient excuse." His voice was low and intense. "I kissed you because I wanted to. Because I've wanted to since you looked at me that first night like you would rather fight me than obey me." Because you make me feel things I thought I had lost the capacity to feel. Joyce's breath caught. Jun-sung. You asked for honesty. That is mine. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. Take your time. Figure out what you feel. But know that when you do, I will be here. Waiting. He stood and left the room, and Joyce sat there with her heart pounding, her carefully constructed defenses crumbling. This man who should have been easy to hate was making it impossible to maintain her anger. Worse, he was making her want things she had convinced herself were off-limits. Over the following week, they began the careful dance of getting to know each other. Jun-sung would join her for breakfast, and they would talk about ordinary things. Her classes. His meetings, described in careful terms that omitted the illegal details, but gave her insight into his world. He asked about Nigeria, about her family, about the life she had left behind. She asked about his childhood, about how he had built his organization, about what he wanted from the years ahead. The answers were revealing. Jun-sung had grown up in poverty during the Korean War, had clawed his way up from nothing through intelligence and ruthlessness. He had principles about his business: no trafficking, no drugs that destroyed communities, no unnecessary violence. He donated anonymously to schools and hospitals, operated by a code that was invisible to outsiders, but absolute to him. I am not a good man, he told her one evening as they sat on the terrace overlooking the city. But I try to be a man with honor. That is the best I can offer. Joyce sipped her tea, considering. I think good and bad are too simple. Most people exist in the space between. And where do you think I exist? She looked at him, this complicated man who had disrupted her entire life. I think you exist in the gray. I think you do terrible things for reasons you have convinced yourself are justified. But I also think you are capable of kindness and care, even if you wrap it in control. That is a fair assessment. He studied her in return. And where do you think you exist, Joyce Eshin? I used to think I was firmly in the good. But now I do not know. She set down her cup. Because I am starting to care about you, and that should be wrong. You bought me like property. You took away my choices. I should hate you. But you do not. But I do not. The admission felt like stepping off a cliff. And I do not know what to do with that. Jun-sung was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a weight that made Joyce's chest tighten. I have lived a long life. I have accumulated power and wealth and respect. But I have never had someone look at me the way you do. Like I am worth understanding rather than just fearing or using. How do I look at you? Like I am human. He reached across the small table between them and took her hand, his touch gentle despite his strength. Like maybe I could be more than what I have been. Joyce's throat felt tight. I do not want to be another possession to you. You were never that. His thumb brushed across her knuckles. From the moment you walked into my home with your spine straight and your eyes defiant, you were something else entirely. I just did not have the words for it then. And now? Joyce barely recognized her own voice, soft and uncertain. Now I think the words might be too dangerous to say. He released her hand, but held her gaze. Because saying them would make them real, and once they are real, I will not be able to take them back or walk away or pretend this is still just an arrangement. They sat in silence, the city lights spreading below them like fallen stars. Joyce felt something enormous hovering between them, an acknowledgement that would change everything. She was terrified of it. She was also, she realized, ready for it. But before she could form words around the chaos in her chest, Jun-sung's phone rang. His expression shifted instantly, the softness replaced by sharp focus. He answered in rapid Korean, his tone clipped. When he hung up, tension radiated from him like heat. There is a situation I need to handle, he said, standing. Stay inside tonight. Lock your door. Do not open it for anyone but me. What kind of situation? Joyce stood as well, anxiety replacing the warm intimacy of moments before. The kind that is part of my world and should not touch yours. He gripped her shoulders gently. Promise me you will stay inside. Jun-sung, you are scaring me. Good. Fear will keep you safe. He pressed a quick, hard kiss to her forehead. I will be back before morning. Trust me. Then he was gone, and Joyce stood on the terrace listening to cars start below and drive away with urgent speed. The house suddenly felt too big and too quiet. She went inside and locked her bedroom door as instructed, but sleep was impossible. She lay in bed watching the clock, every sound making her jump. Jun-sung returned just before dawn. Joyce heard his footsteps on the stairs and opened her door without thinking. He looked exhausted, his shirt stained with something dark that might have been blood. When he saw her, something in his expression cracked. "I told you to stay inside your room," he said, but there was no anger in it. "I was worried." Joyce moved toward him before her brain could intervene. "Are you hurt?" "Not my blood." He caught her hand before she could touch his shirt. "Joyce, you should not involve yourself in this part of my life." "Too late. I am already involved." She tugged him toward her bathroom. "Come on. Let me see." He followed with uncharacteristic docility, and Joyce realized he was more shaken than he wanted to admit. In the bright bathroom light, she could see the exhaustion etched into his features. She helped him remove his shirt, her nursing training overriding her nervousness at seeing him half-dressed. There were old scars across his chest and back, a history of violence written on his skin. She wet a washcloth and began cleaning the blood from his hands and arms, working with gentle efficiency. Jun-sung watched her in silence, something raw and open in his expression that made her chest ache. "Why are you doing this?" he asked quietly. "Because you need help." Joyce rinsed the cloth. "Because despite everything, I care what happens to you." "You should not care about a man like me." "Probably not." She met his gaze. "But I do anyway." Something broke in him then. He pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her waist and burying his face against her neck. Joyce felt him trembling, this powerful man showing vulnerability he likely revealed to no one else. She held him back, one hand stroking through his hair, feeling the dampness of tears against her skin. "I killed someone tonight," he said, the words muffled against her shoulder. "He was coming for you. For leverage against me. I found out in time, but Joyce, if I had not." "But you did." She tightened her hold on him. "I am safe. You kept me safe. This is my world. This violence, these threats. You should not have to live with this." "Maybe not. But I am here. And you are here. And right now, that is enough." They stood like that for a long time, wrapped around each other in the too bright bathroom. When Jun-sung finally pulled back, his eyes were red-rimmed but clearer. "Get some sleep," Joyce said gently. "You are exhausted. Sleep with me." He caught her hand when she started to pull away. "Not like that. I just do not want to be alone right now." Joyce knew she should refuse. This was crossing a line they had carefully avoided. But looking at him, seeing the vulnerability he was offering her, she could not find the words to say no. They ended up in his bedroom, a space she had never entered before. It was simpler than she expected, less ostentatious than the rest of the house. Jun-sung pulled on a clean shirt and climbed into bed, and Joyce hesitated only a moment before joining him. He pulled her against his chest, one arm around her waist, and she felt him relax incrementally. "Thank you," he murmured against her hair. Joyce closed her eyes, feeling his heartbeat steady and strong beneath her ear. "For what?" "For not running. For being here. For looking at me like I am worth saving." She wanted to tell him that she did not know if anyone could save him, that she was barely keeping herself together. But instead she said, "Sleep. We can figure out what this means tomorrow. And if it means everything?" His voice was already fading towards sleep. "Then we will figure out everything tomorrow." She felt him smile against her hair. Dangerous woman. Joyce did not answer, but as she lay there listening to his breathing even out into sleep, she thought maybe he was right. Maybe she was dangerous. Because despite every reason not to, despite the impossible circumstances and the violence and the fear, she was falling for Park Jun-sung. And once she admitted that to herself, there would be no going back. Morning came too soon, sunlight streaming through windows Joyce had not thought to close. She woke to find Jun-sung already awake, propped on one elbow watching her with an intensity that made her pulse jump. How long have you been awake? She asked, her voice rough with sleep. Long enough to memorize every detail of your face. His free hand came up to trace the line of her jaw. Long enough to realize that I am in serious trouble. What kind of trouble? But Joyce knew. She could feel it in the charged air between them. The kind where I am falling in love with my wife and have no idea how to protect her from my world. His thumb brushed across her lower lip. The kind where every choice I make could hurt her, but not making choices will hurt her more. Joyce's breath caught. Jun-sung, tell me if I am alone in this. Tell me if what I feel is one-sided, and I will find a way to lock it away. His eyes searched hers. But if you feel even a fraction of what I do, then we need to talk about what happens next. Joyce thought about denying it, about protecting herself. But looking at him, seeing the same fear and hope reflected in his expression that she felt in her chest, she could not lie. You are not alone, she whispered. I do not want to feel this way. It makes no sense. But I do. I care about you. I want you. And it terrifies me. The tension in Jun-sung's shoulders released. He leaned down, giving her time to pull away, and kissed her slowly. This was different from their first kiss. This was deliberate and tender and laced with promise. Joyce kissed him back, letting herself feel the full force of her emotions instead of fighting them. When they finally broke apart, Jun-sung rested his forehead against hers. I will keep you safe. Whatever it takes, whoever I have to remove, whatever lines I have to cross. You are mine to protect now. I am not property, Joyce said, but there was no heat in it. No. You are something far more precious. He kissed her again, quick and fierce. You are my choice. And I am yours, if you will have me. Joyce thought about all the choices that had led them here. Her father's desperation. Jun-sung's offer. Her decision to find strength instead of giving up. Every moment had been building to this. Two people who should never have found each other somehow becoming essential to each other's existence. I choose you, she said, and felt the truth of it settle into her bones. I choose this. Even though it is complicated and dangerous and probably insane. Definitely insane, Jun-sung agreed. But I have lived a careful life for too long. You make me want to be reckless. They spent the morning in bed, talking and kissing and learning each other's bodies with tentative touches. Joyce traced the scars on his chest, and he mapped the curve of her waist with reverent hands. Nothing went further than kissing and exploration, but it felt monumental. She was choosing to be vulnerable with him. He was choosing to be gentle with her. Later, as they sat in the kitchen eating breakfast that Jun-sung had made with surprising skill, Joyce's phone rang. Her father's number. She had not spoken to her family since arriving in Seoul, the distance feeling like necessary protection. Now she answered with hesitation. Her father's voice was urgent. Joyce, has your husband spoken to you about the situation? What situation? Fear immediately tightened her chest. The men I borrowed from. They are not satisfied with the arrangement. They are saying Jun-sung owes them more, that you were not sufficient payment. Her father's voice cracked. They are threatening to come for your mother and sister. Joyce looked at Jun-sung, who had gone very still. Put me on speaker, he said quietly. She did, and her father's panicked breathing filled the kitchen. Jun-sung's expression had shifted into something cold and calculating, the gentle man from moments ago, replaced by the crime boss she sometimes forgot he was. Mr. Eshin, this is Park Jun-sung. Tell me exactly what was said to you. Her father recounted the threats, his fear palpable even across the distance. When he finished, Jun-sung's jaw was tight. They will not touch your family, he said with absolute certainty. I will handle this today. Keep your wife and daughter inside. Do not answer the door for anyone. I will call you when it is resolved. But how can you? Because I am very good at handling men who do not keep their agreements. Jun-sung's voice carried a promise of violence that made Joyce shiver. Trust me. He ended the call and immediately began making others, speaking in rapid Korean to various people. Joyce listened to his tone shift from cold command to something even more dangerous. When he finally hung up, he looked at her with an expression she could not quite read. I need to go back to Lagos, he said. This needs to be dealt with in person, permanently. These men need to understand that you and your family are completely off limits. I am coming with you. Joyce stood, already mentally preparing. Absolutely not. This will be dangerous. They are threatening my family. I am coming. She crossed her arms. Unless you plan to lock me in my room, I am getting on that plane. Jun-sung stared at her for a long moment, then something like admiration flickered across his face. You are the most stubborn woman I have ever met. You married me for my spirit, remember? He pulled her close, kissing her hard. I am going to keep you safe, even if it means keeping you safe from myself. They flew to Lagos that afternoon on a private jet, Jun-sung making calls the entire flight. Joyce sat across from him, watching him orchestrate something complex and probably violent with clinical precision. This was the man the rest of the world saw. Powerful, dangerous, untouchable. But when he looked at her between calls, she saw the softness underneath. The man who played piano and kissed her like she was precious. The man who had killed to protect her without hesitation. Lagos assaulted her senses the moment they landed. The humidity, the noise, the familiar chaos that she had not realized she missed. Jun-sung's men met them at the airport, security that formed a protective barrier as they moved through the terminal. People stared openly at the foreign man with his expensive suit and hard-eyed guards. They went first to Joyce's family home, a small apartment in a crowded neighborhood. Her mother opened the door, her face crumpling when she saw Joyce. They embraced, her mother switching between English and Yoruba, thanking Jun-sung over and over. Her father looked smaller than Joyce remembered, worn down by fear and guilt. Her younger sister, Esther, stared at Jun-sung with wide eyes. You are safe now, Jun-sung told them, his English carefully formal. The men who threatened you will not be a problem after today. How can you be certain? Joyce's father asked. Because I am about to give them a choice between keeping their agreement or ceasing to exist. Jun-sung's voice was matter-of-fact. They will choose correctly, or they will be removed from the equation. Joyce's mother gripped her hand. Is he always so direct? Always, Joyce said, surprised to find herself almost smiling. It is one of his more endearing qualities. Jun-sung left with his men an hour later, extracting a promise from Joyce that she would stay with her family. She watched him go, her stomach tight with worry. Esther came to stand beside her at the window. He is scary, her younger sister said. But he looks at you like you are the only person in the room. Is that how it seems? That is exactly how it seems. Esther was 15, old enough to recognize something real when she saw it. Do you love him? Joyce considered the question, turning it over like a stone. I think I might. Which is probably the most foolish thing I have ever done. Or the bravest. Esther bumped her shoulder. You married a stranger to save us. Now you are choosing to love him. That takes courage. The hours crawled by with agonizing slowness. Joyce's mother cooked, needing something to do with her hands. Her father paced, checking the windows every few minutes. Joyce tried to study, but gave up after reading the same paragraph 5 times without comprehending it. When her phone finally rang, she nearly dropped it in her haste to answer. It is done. Jun-sung's voice was tired but satisfied. They will not bother your family again. Ever. What did you do? Joyce stepped into the bedroom for privacy. What needed to be done? The details would not make you happy. He paused. But no one died, if that is what concerns you. Sometimes a demonstration of power is more effective than using it. Relief made her knees weak. When are you coming back? Soon. I have one more meeting, then I will return to collect my wife. His voice softened on the last words. Are you well? I am better now that I know you are safe. The admission came easily. Jun-sung, be careful. Please. For you, I will be very careful. I have too much to lose now. He returned 2 hours later looking exhausted but unharmed. Joyce met him at the door, not caring that her family was watching, and wrapped her arms around him. He held her tightly, his face buried in her hair. Take me home, she whispered. Take me back to Seoul. They said their goodbyes to her family with promises to visit again soon. Her mother pulled Jun-sung aside before they left, speaking to him in low tones that Joyce could not quite hear. Whatever she said made him nod seriously, then press a kiss to her mother's hand with old-fashioned courtesy. On the flight back, Joyce finally asked what her mother had told him. She said that she gave me her daughter in desperation, but now she is trusting me with her daughter's happiness. Jun-sung pulled Joyce into his lap, kneading her close. She said that is a much greater responsibility than debt. She is right. Joyce traced the line of his jaw, feeling the tension there. What you did today, removing that threat, that was for my family. But what happens next? There will always be threats in your world. Then I will remove them. His arms tightened around her. Every single one. Whatever it takes. That is not sustainable. You cannot fight the entire world. Watch me. He tilted her face up, his eyes fierce. I have spent 60 years surviving. Now I have a reason to do more than just survive. You think I will not burn down everything to keep you safe? The intensity of his words should have frightened her. Instead, Joyce felt something settle into place. This was who he was. A man who loved completely and protected absolutely, even if his methods were questionable. She could accept that or walk away, but she could not change it. Then I guess I will have to learn to live with having a husband who makes dramatic declarations, she said, trying to lighten the moment. You will have to learn to live with a husband who is obsessed with you. Jun-sung kissed her slowly. Who thinks about you constantly? Who would rather face his enemies than be separated from you for a day? Joyce kissed him back, pouring everything she felt into it. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, she rested her forehead against his. I think I am falling in love with you, she admitted. Actually, I think I already fell. I am just catching up to the realization. I know I love you. His certainty was absolute. I knew the moment you yelled at me for coming to your gym. You were furious and beautiful and so alive. I thought, this woman will either destroy me or save me. What if I do both? Then it will be worth it. He kissed her again, gentle this time. Every moment with you is worth whatever it costs. They returned to Seoul to find spring beginning to transform the city. Cherry blossoms appeared overnight, coating the streets in pink and white. Joyce's classes intensified as she approached exams, and Jun-sung threw himself into restructuring his organization with new security measures. But they always found time for each other. Mornings in the kitchen cooking breakfast together. Evenings on the terrace watching the city lights. Nights tangled together in bed, learning each other's bodies and hearts with equal intensity. Joyce still trained with Min-ji, but now Jun-sung often came to watch. He never interfered, but his presence made her push harder, wanting to impress him even though she knew it was foolish. One day, as she was sparring, one of Jun-sung's men entered the gym and spoke to him urgently. She saw his expression shift, saw him stand and head for the door. Without thinking, she broke off her sparring. What happened? She called. He turned back, surprise and something else flickering across his face. Business. Nothing for you to worry about. If it involves you, I worry. Joyce ignored Min-ji's disapproving look and crossed to him. Tell me. One of my shipments was intercepted. Rivals are making a move. He touched her face briefly. I need to handle it. Then I am coming with you. Joyce, this is not a situation where you can help. Maybe not. But I can be there. She held his gaze. You do not have to face everything alone anymore. Something in his expression cracked open. He pulled her close, kissing her hard enough that several gym members stared openly. You make me weak, he murmured against her lips. No. I make you human. Joyce kissed him back. There is a difference. He brought her to the meeting, though he made her promise to stay back with his most trusted guard. Joyce watched from a distance as Jun-sung negotiated with men who looked every bit as dangerous as he did. The conversation was in Korean, but she could read the body language. Threats exchanged. Positions staked. When one man made a gesture toward violence, Jun-sung moved so fast that Joyce almost missed it. He had the man pinned against a wall before anyone else could react, speaking in a low voice that carried despite the distance. Whatever he said made the man pale. When Jun-sung released him, the entire group seemed to deflate. The meeting ended quickly after that. various men leaving with backward glances. Junsung returned to Joyce, his knuckles slightly bloody, but his expression satisfied. "They will reroute my shipment and pay a penalty for the trouble," he said, taking her hand. "Come. I need to clean up, then I am taking you to dinner. Your knuckles are bleeding." "I am aware." He lifted her hand to his lips. "Will my nurse wife take care of me?" Joyce tried to maintain her concern, but his playfulness undermined it. "You are impossible. I am yours." He pulled her close as they walked to the car. "That is all that matters." They fell into a rhythm over the following weeks, their relationship deepening with each passing day. Joyce aced her exams, and Junsung threw her a surprise party that was carefully attended by people from both their worlds. Her classmates mingled awkwardly with his associates, but the gesture touched her more than she could express. Late that night, after everyone had left, they stood on the terrace watching fireworks someone had arranged to light up the sky. "This is not the life I imagined for myself," Joyce said, leaning back against Junsung's chest. "Is that a complaint?" His arms wrapped around her waist. "No, it is an observation." She turned in his embrace to face him. "I thought I wanted safety and predictability. A quiet life built on my own terms. And now? Now I think maybe I want this instead. Chaos and danger and a husband who makes me feel alive." She reached up to cup his face. "I think maybe I want you more than I ever wanted safe." Junsung kissed her, deep and thorough, pouring everything into it. When they finally broke apart, his eyes were bright with emotion. "Marry me again," he said suddenly. Joyce laughed. "We are already married. A real wedding this time. Not an arrangement, but a choice. You in a dress you pick, me promising to love you in front of everyone who matters." His hands framed her face. "Marry me because you want to, not because you have to." Tears pricked Joyce's eyes. "You are asking me to choose you. I am begging you to choose me." His voice roughened. "Every day for the rest of my life, however long that is. Choose me, Joyce." She kissed him instead of answering, kissing him until they were both breathless and laughing and holding each other like they could merge into one person. When she finally pulled back, her cheeks were wet but she was smiling. "Yes," she said. "I choose you. Today and tomorrow and every day after that. I choose this life and this chaos and you." Junsung lifted her off her feet, spinning her around like they were young and foolish instead of two people who had found each other through darkness. When he set her down, he was grinning in a way she had never seen before, younger somehow. "I will give you everything," he promised. "Everything I have, everything I am. It is all yours. I do not need everything." Joyce traced his smile with her finger. "I just need you. The rest is extra." They planned a small ceremony for a month later, just close friends and family. Joyce's family flew in from Lagos, and watching her mother embrace Junsung like a son made Joyce's heart full to bursting. Esther was her maid of honor, spending the morning helping her get ready. "You look happy," Esther said as she fixed Joyce's veil. "Really, truly happy." "I am." Joyce looked at herself in the mirror, seeing someone she almost did not recognize. Confident. Radiant. In love. "I did not think it was possible, but I am." The ceremony was held in the garden at sunset, cherry blossoms drifting through the air like pink snow. When Joyce walked toward Junsung and saw his expression, openly awed and tender, she knew she had made the right choice. Not the safe choice or the expected choice, but the right one for her. He took her hands when she reached him, his grip steady and sure. "I promise to protect you," he said, his voice carrying in the quiet garden. "To choose you above everything else. To love you with everything I am, even the dark parts you probably wish did not exist." Joyce smiled through tears. "I promise to stand beside you. To challenge you when you need it and support you always. To love you not despite who you are, but because of who you are. Every complicated, dangerous, wonderful part." When they kissed, Joyce felt the last of her reservations fall away. This was her choice. Her life. Her love. And she was choosing it with eyes wide open and heart completely given. The reception was loud and joyful, people from impossibly different worlds coming together to celebrate something that should not have worked, but somehow did. Joyce danced with her father, with Jun Sung's oldest associates, with Esther. But her favorite dance was the last one, alone with her husband under strings of lights as the party wound down. Happy? Jun Sung asked, holding her close. Ridiculously happy. Joyce rested her head on his shoulder. How did we get here? From that first awful meeting to this. You refused to let me break you. And I refused to let you go. He kissed the top of her head. Everything else was just details. Joyce laughed. Somehow I think the details mattered quite a bit. Perhaps. His arms tightened around her. But the outcome was inevitable. You were always going to be mine, and I was always going to be yours. We just had to figure out how to get there. Later, after everyone had left and they were alone in their bedroom, Joyce stood at the window looking out at Seoul spread below. Jun Sung came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. Any regrets? He asked quietly. Joyce thought about everything that had brought them to this moment. The fear and anger and confusion. The slow build of trust and attraction. The choice to love someone impossible and make it work anyway. Not a single one, she said, turning in his arms. You. Only that I did not find you sooner. He kissed her softly. But I have you now. That is all that matters. You have me now, Joyce agreed, pulling him closer. And I have you. Against all odds and reason. Against all odds and reason, Jun Sung echoed. But inevitable all the same. They stood together as the city lights glittered below, two people who had found each other in the most unlikely circumstances and chosen to build something real from it. The future would bring challenges, Joyce knew. Jun Sung's world would always carry danger, and her principles would sometimes clash with his methods. But they would face it together, choosing each other again and again. And that, Joyce thought as Jun Sung led her to their bed, was more than enough. It was everything.